Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to another video. We are going to watch Umbaro from the SAHB clan. Shout out to you guys. Playing his Tier 8 German light premium tank, the M4190. The German Bulldog. And he is just loaded into this game and is delighted to see that he, for once, has great matchmaking. He's top tier. And there is no wheeled vehicle on the enemy team. Hallelujah! So he can go out now and actually play like a light tank and spot for his team. There is no EBR on the enemy team. There's no one that's going to put on their red wig, their red nose, and their floppy shoes and drive around like a clown and counter him in the first 5 seconds of the game. So he can do something that is very rare for regular light tanks to do these days, and that is to move into a bush like this and light almost everyone. And even take a cheeky shot while he's at it. Okay, he's lit those guys. How much? Team? Team? McFly? Well, I didn't say he'd get any spotting assist. I just said he would do some spotting. And the game has changed, guys. The game has changed. And most tanks now are not really ready for a light tank to spot for them, because usually it's just a clown car show in the middle. And everyone just sticks to the back these days, because most games there are EBRs, and if you do move up to try and shoot, you're going to get lit. And you're going to get... It's just a... You know what it's like. I used to love this tank, the German, this Tier 8 premium tank. I used to love it. And when it first came out, let me paint a picture for you. When it first came out, years ago, it was the time when there were no Tier 9 and 10 light tanks. The light tank line stopped at Tier 8. Tier 8 was the highest you could go. And when you played a light tank, you were always bottom tier. Always. If you were in a Tier 8 light tank, you would be in a Tier 10 game. And your job was to spot for your team. And I was okay with that. I thought, you know, it's very challenging. It required some smart gameplay. Your team relied on you. It was fun. Well, then they introduced Tier 9 and 10 light tanks, which was okay. It was okay, especially if you were the Tier 10 light tank. Or if you were the Tier 9 light tank and you were top tier. But very often, if you played as, for instance, a Tier 8 light tank like this, you could then get into a game, a Tier 9 or a Tier 10 game, in which your team and the enemy team would have a Tier 9 or 10 light tank. So then you're the Tier 8 light tank in a game, in a Tier 10 game, and there's Tier 10 light tanks in the game. So you're not as good as the Tier 10 light tanks. So then what it made it a little awkward. And that happened occasionally, but not all the time. Every now and then you would still get a Tier 10 game where you were the only light tank. It was, you know, you could still make it work. And then they introduced the wheeled vehicles. The wheeled vehicles, of course, because why not? Why not have a new class of vehicle that could go faster than all the other light tanks? A new non-tank with rubber tires that could absorb huge hits from large tank guns and merely receive a flat tire. And then Bozo the Clown could jump out and run beside the wheeled vehicle, pump up that tire and keep going at 100 kilometers an hour. Do circles around people. Do maneuvers that would subject the crew to 55 G-force turns. And leap through the air and jump over people and do cartwheels and auto-lock and slip and dominate on the battle. And getting a little carried away, but you get the picture. They introduced the wheeled vehicles. Which then all of a sudden, for the life of a regular Tier 8 light tank, the people that loved the light tank lines that grinded to Tier 8 and bought Tier 8 premiums, like this one. Now, when you play a Tier 8 light tank like this, you are very likely to get into a Tier 9 or a Tier 10 game. And you're very likely to have a Tier 9 or a Tier 10 EBR on your team and the enemy team, or even worse, just on the enemy team. Then what the hell do you do? What do you do? For example, if this was a Tier 10 game and the enemies had an EBR 105 and Umbaro here tried to get to this bush, he would be halfway to this bush And the EBR would zoom by at 100 kilometers. Mario! And he would be lit, and he'd have to bail. He'd have to say, holy shit, I'm lit. He'd have to turn around and try and escape, but the EBR would auto-lock on him, and as he was leaping over this trench, he would shout out, Mario! And he'd hit him for 540 damage and scoot away, and his team would stop and take 12 shots at the EBR, and 11 of them would miss, and one shot from a grille would hit him, but it wouldn't do 750 damage. It would just... one of the front wheels would wobble, and the driver of the EBR would jump out of the EBR and pull out his little pump and go and drive away. Let's just say that the wheeled vehicles have completely, totally destroyed gameplay for regular light tanks in Tier 8, 9, and 10. Especially Tier 8 when you're bottom tier in a Tier 10 game. Pretty bad for Tier 9, and just horrible for Tier 10. And the reason it's horrible for Tier 10, I know, I've experienced it. When you grind to Tier 10, on any of the regular light lines, the Manticore, the Panzerflipwagen, you know, all of the regular Tier 10 light tanks, not cars. The problem is, whenever you launch a game, you know you're going to be in a Tier 10 game, because you're a Tier 10. Your team has a light tank. You've launched the game. You are on the team. You're a Tier 10 light tank. The enemy team, the matchmaker then says, well, the enemy teams need a light tank. Let's put one on the enemy team. Well, most people are playing EBRs. So the chance is, whenever you play a Tier 10 light tank and you launch the game, you have a very good chance of being in a game where you are the Tier 10 light tank on your team, and the enemy team gets an EBR. And that's fun, isn't it? It's just a shit show. It's just a complete, total, utter waste of time playing high-tier light tanks. I know, some people will still say, well, it's just one more little bit of adversity, one more thing I have to worry about. It makes it a more of a challenge. And that's fine if you think that, you know, have a cookie. But really what's happened is it's become a clown show, right? And I've gone on long enough. This is the No Bullshit channel where I give you my honest opinion, and that's my opinion. So that's the complaining part. So what do you do? I'll tell you what I did. Is, well, basically I just stopped playing Tier 9 and 10 regular light tanks. I mean, I love them. I spent a lot of time grinding all the lines. Except for the Chinese line, I'm still going. I've gotten to Tier 9 on all of them. I've bought a few of the Tier 10s, and I just can't stand it, right? I got the Manticore, and I played about 20 games in the Manticore, and that's already a challenge to play. But half of those 20 games, there's an EBR 105 in the enemy team. And, you know, if I can get to that bush, and if I can use my concealment, if I can try not... you know, it could work, and I know some people have great games in the Manticore, but 9 times out of 10, you get to that spot, and you're concealed, and you're at that bush, and you're ready to use your big aircraft carrier gun, or whatever the hell battleship gun that it has, and then, right, the EBR swings by, Mario! Luigi! Right? And you're lit, and you're screwed. And there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do except just rage. So I don't bother. But what I have found is that I found new joy in playing the Tier 6 and the Tier 7 light tanks of any nation. I'm playing the Chinese one, the 5916. Pick any nation and play the Tier 5, 6, and 7. Mainly Tier 6 and 7. 7 being the sweet spot for me, because Tier 7 is high enough tier that you can get those challenging games. And you're very unlikely to have to be in a Tier 9 game with... you can end up, if you're playing a Tier 7 regular light tank, you can end up in a Tier 9 game where the enemies get a Tier 9 EBR. Well, that's the worst case scenario. But usually you're in a Tier 9, 8, or 7 game that does... if there's a tier 7, one of those tier 7 wheeled vehicles is not that good. The tier 8 wheeled vehicles, well, you know, that happens occasionally, that premium one. But it's not as often as if you're playing tier 9 and 10. So that's how I've done what I've done to counter the EBR infestation that is destroying this game, is I've just focused on playing tier 6 and 7 for light tanks, and I've given up playing any, as well, I've given up playing any high tier heavy tank that's really slow. I can't stand it anymore on the open maps when you're playing something like a Mouse or a Type 5 Heavy or one of those really big slow ones. The game starts 7 seconds into the game, you're lit. It doesn't matter what direction you go, whether you reverse, or whether you turn and run away immediately. In 7 seconds you're lit, because the EBR 105 can drive 100 kilometers an hour. And you're lit in 7 seconds, and then you're being hit by artillery, and you're just an XP pinata. Except occasionally when you're in a city map and you can get to that choke point and you can have a great game. But it's just, life's too short, is what I'm saying, guys. Life is too short. So those are the adjustments I've made. Stick to tier 6, 7 light tank play, and forget about the big slow tanks. That's how I've handled it. Let me know in the comments how you've handled it. Umbado here is dedicated to his tier 8 premium tank, and I love you, buddy. He's just, look at this. As I've been talking, he's been just dominating here. Just basically, he's just a tank here. He's not a light tank. He's just a tank, and he's dominating on the battlefield. He's got 7 kills. How much spotting assist did he do? 0. Because he spent the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game in the middle of the map detecting people, but nobody shot. Nobody shot, and he realized, you know what? My team is not used to having light tanks light for them. Most light tank players are hiding at the back now because they're scared of the EBRs. So people are not accustomed to a light tank actually moving up and spotting. Either that or they're all Muppets. Either way, they didn't shoot their guns. And so what did he do? He stayed alive. And he played, and he had a fantastic game here. Look at this. You loaded HE so you could low roll. Good job. The HE always does damage. And the shove velocity is slower, so it's harder to hit. But stick with the HE. There you go. You could have just shot him with regular ammo and killed him in 2 shots, but he does it! Victory! Victory. Great job, buddy. I'm sorry that most of the gameplay we watched was filled with my rant about the wheeled vehicles. You've heard it 100 times, but look at this game. Look at this result. You can't argue. Over 5,000 damage. Anyone that says, oh, he didn't move up, he didn't spot, he didn't, have a cookie. He played the game however he wanted to play it. He adapted to the situations, the situation around him and what the enemies were doing, and the fact that his teammates wouldn't shoot. He used his speed and his concealment to move around the battlefield, survive, and win. Great job, buddy. And a little bit of a suggestion for wargaming: if you're going to be committed with these wheeled vehicles, if you're going to keep them in the game and not nerf them, let's make them more realistic. Obviously, they're here to stay. So, I mean, we have Chuck Norris as a commander now. We have EUCCs as commanders. Why don't we go all the way here for the wheeled vehicles? Why don't you get Bozo the Clown? There could be an event where you could get Bozo the Clown or Eric the Clown, if Bozo is copywritten, and make some animation that makes the game more realistic. When you shoot them and you just hit the wheels, and you could have Bozo the Clown jump out of the wheeled vehicles and run along beside it, right, with his little pump, with his red nose and his floppy shoes, just keeping up and going, let's go, Mario, right? And jump back in, ha ha ha, and speed away. You could add that kind of animation into the game to make it more realistic as you're, I think that's the effect you're going for. So come on, let's get it going here. Do it properly. If you're gonna do it properly. I want to see an event. You could pick some NACCs. Claus the Clown, right? I'll volunteer. You can give me red hair and a big red nose. Right? You could do some animations with the big floppy shoes. You could do some voice sounds, right? From the tires being repaired. Mario, gotcha! You can maybe have some banana peels that you can throw out of the back of your tank while you're scooting away. So if there's a T-54 following you, you can go over the banana peel, go wah, and fly in the air. Come on, let's get it. Come on, Wargaming. Let's do it.